He wanted to leave. Now that he'd managed to fill his velvet pouch, the jewels weighed heavily against him, and he wanted to escape back to his tiny house on Clarges Street, where he could admire the huge, ugly jewels at his leisure and calculate how much money they would bring him, and whether he'd sink more of it into the rapidly decaying pile of stone known as Glenshiel Abbey, or simply scatter it at the gaming tables. But he didn't dare leave yet. It would be too remarkable. At least a fortune-teller might manage to beguile him enough to bear the next 2 or 3 hours until he could escape. Miss Carstairs caught his hand again. "Come with me, Alistair. I may need you for moral comfort if she tells me something depressing." "Trust me, my love," he murmured, allowing her to draw him through the crowds of people toward one of his hostess's gaming rooms. "Morality is one thing I'm in short supply of." The room was even more packed than the ballroom. He could see Isolde Plumworthy, her stately bulk ensconced on a chaise, her hand upon the satin-breeched thigh of young Calderwood. The boy was barely out of leading strings, 20 if he was a day, and he looked both terrified and flattered by Lady Plumworthy's attention. Pity, Alistair thought, turning away from them. At first he couldn't see the clairvoyant through the crowds of people. Miss Carstairs lost her grip on his hand, for which he was devoutly grateful, and they were separated. He moved through the crush with his usual feline grace, slyly observant beneath half-lowered eyelids. It took him a moment to realize that the quietly dressed young woman who sat at the green baize table was, in fact, the fortune-teller. She was concentrating on the cards laid out in front of her, her head bowed, so his first impression was of a small, well-shaped head crowned with a neatly arranged cap of hair, light brown, ordinary enough. She was dressed in a sedate blue dress, with a minimum of ornamentation, and the hands that held the pack of cards were devoid of even a plain silver ring. Pretty hands, though, he thought, and willed her to look up at him. If she felt his silent summons, she managed to ignore it, a fact that amused him. He moved to the edge of the room behind her, where he could watch the back of her head and his fellow guests' gullible reactions. Her head lifted, and he could see her profile. Surprisingly delicate for a bourgeois, he thought. He moved slightly, hoping for a better glimpse, but she managed to elude him. The longer he was unable to get a proper view of her, the more determined he became. Her voice was soft, but surprisingly clear, and no Sit's voice. "I see a man, Lady Plumworthy," she murmured, "in your bedchamber." Alistair didn't move as the crowd tittered. There was no reason why she should be referring to him, when there were far more obvious reasons for a man to be in Isolde's bedchamber. The leering smile she cast at young Calderwood suggested that Lady Plumworthy agreed. "A lady doesn't admit to such things," Isolde announced in a voice subtly less cultured than her fortune-teller's. Isolde Plumworthy had risen in the world during her long and varied career. Alistair could guess that the fortune-teller, conversely, had fallen upon impecunious times. He moved slightly, still frustrated by his inability to get a glimpse of her. "This man is not a friend or a suitor, milady," the girl said quietly. "He is a thief." Alistair grew very still indeed. The buzz of conversation increased, and Lady Plumworthy no longer seemed quite so sanguine. "You're telling me I shall be robbed?" she demanded, releasing her grip on Calderwood's thigh. The young man took that moment to escape, wise child that he was. Alistair stayed watching. "I believe the robbery might already have occurred," the girl said. "Nonsense," Lady Plumworthy hissed. "No one would dare." "Perhaps the cat has struck again," Freddie Arbuthnot said with a silly laugh. "It's been quite a time since he's been on the prowl." "I do believe, Freddie," Alistair said lazily, "that the cat has never been seen. How can you be sure it's a man?" "Don't be daft," Freddie protested. "What else could it be? There's more than physical agility involved in these robberies. There's incredible daring and cunning as well. Don't expect me to believe a child could carry out such